The Iranian regime will have to be dealt with by President Trump. I'm confident he will go back to a model which tries to get to a better outcome. A new sheriff in town, a new leader in just, goodness, under 4 weeks now will make an enormous amount of difference.
So that sound, that praise for Donald Trump, that's from 4 weeks ago, and it's from Mike Pompeo. You may remember him from Trump's first term. He was first the CIA director, then the Secretary of State. But my, what a difference 4 weeks makes. Pompeo, up until today, had been receiving briefings and had a security detail to protect him because of ongoing threats on his life from Iran because of his role in the Soleimani hit. That security detail was put in place by the Biden administration and stayed in place despite his praise for Trump and attacks on Biden. It has been revoked, though, by Donald Trump, the man he praised there in that clip. And on that, the New York Times reports this, quote, President Trump revoked security protection for his former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and a former top aide, Brian Hook, despite warnings from the Biden administration that both men faced ongoing threats from Iran because of actions they took on Trump's behalf. 4 people with knowledge of the matter said Thursday. The New York Times reports that the security details were pulled Tuesday, just a day after Trump's former national security advisor and critic, John Bolton. But Pompeo had remained publicly supportive of Trump. So the question is, why put his life in danger? Let's bring in former CIA director, now senior national security analyst John Brennan, and New York Times diplomatic correspondent Michael Crowley. Michael Crowley, on the reporting, my understanding is that this group of former senior national security officials, including Donald Trump himself, but also his then chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, Mike Pompeo, who was Secretary of State at the time, John Bolton, was related to, or the intelligence stream at least related to, a pledge for retribution from Iran over the strike that killed Soleimani in Iraq. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's our understanding. I mean, after that strike, which was devastating for Iran, both in terms of costing them a critical military and strategic leader, but also completely humiliating. Following that, Iran did very little to retaliate. There was a strike against a U.S. military base that certainly did injure American soldiers who had concussions, but in relative terms, it was a pretty mild response. So I think the Iranians do not feel like they've had anything remotely like compensatory payback.
And so the protection that was afforded to Pompeo and Bolton by President Joe Biden was in relation to an assessment that they faced ongoing threats of retribution from Iran?
That's right. This is not a hypothetical speculative thing. This is the assessment of intelligence agencies. It's based on specific information, and it's not just people wringing their hands or coming up with vague scenarios. And briefly, Nicole, let me tell you, anecdotally, I can say that I was in a Washington restaurant a couple years ago when Mike Pompeo showed up. It looked like he was going to a private event in a private room in the restaurant. And I was gobsmacked by the size of his security detail. Again, he was a former Secretary of State at this point, and he had a retinue of people who looked like they were bodyguards and security men that was, if anything, larger than what you might expect a sitting Secretary of State to have. I mean, there were multiple big black Suburbans, a bunch of guys and women with the earpieces talking to each other just for him to go out to a restaurant. So this was, they were taking this very seriously, obviously.
And Soleimani's still dead, and Iran is still mad about that. So the threat ostensibly hasn't changed. So why does Trump strip the security detail from Pompeo, Hook, and Bolton, Michael Crowley?
Nicole, we don't know for sure, and like so many things with Donald Trump, it's very hard to know exactly what's going on in his head. And this one is a little bit complicated because these 3 men are all different figures. They are on different places. If you try to imagine a spectrum for Trump of where he sees them in terms of allies or foes, he has openly feuded with John Bolton for years, who has publicly denounced Trump, called him unfit for office, said he should not have been president. So, he clearly very much dislikes John Bolton. Mike Pompeo and he had a pretty good relationship when he was president. Pompeo wavered a little bit. I forget the details as I'm sitting here, but after January 6th and the 2020 election, Pompeo was not fully on board with Trump's claims of election fraud and was not among those who were defending the January 6th riot, as I recall. Brian Hook is the biggest mystery here. Brian, to my knowledge, has not spoken out, been critical of President Trump in any notable way. There's been a little bit of speculation that Brian, he went on TV and spoke a little bit about what he thought Trump's approach to Iran would be after the election, including saying he would adopt maximum pressure against Iran. And maybe he got a little far over his skis, but it's really not much to go on. So that's a big question mark.